This presidency is the presidency built by Chief Justice Roberts, who has written, authored every major decision that's empowered and emboldened Donald Trump. It's not just the immunity decision that you've heard about 2 years ago. It's other major decisions. But by the time you're done with this hot take of my interview with constitutional scholar Peter Shane, nobody in America knows more about what we're about to talk about. The presidential immunity case by Roberts, why it matters, where it comes from, where it's going. You'll be able to comfortably talk about it with real knowledge and understanding after watching this clip of Professor Shane and me. And here's the clip.
There's a case called Free Enterprise Fund against the Public Company Oversight Accounting Board. There's a case called, you mentioned, CELA Law versus the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. And most recently, Trump versus the United States, the presidential immunity opinion. And these are cases that all, number one, just as a matter of, their precise holding, as we say, pretty much give the president all but complete control over the hiring and firing of principal officers. You mentioned the Humphreys executive case from 1935, which is the case that upheld Congress in its ability to put conditions on removal. The only question now is whether the court's going to get rid of that entirely. Where the court has taken us so far is that the president, in the view of the Roberts Court, is entitled to fire at will the head of any agency if that agency has a single director. Mm-hmm. So there's the one EPA administrator, the one director of the Consumer Finance
as
Protection.
Opposed to a board control.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. They haven't formally decided yet if that's the law for these multi-member commissions and boards. Mm-hmm. But the second thing, and this is the most alarming opinion to me in a way, is the Trump immunity opinion. Not so much just because of its holding. One hopes that we're not going to have a day in, day out anxiety about, how far you can go in prosecuting former presidents. I suppose that could come up again, but, that's not a day in, day out worry about the Republic. But in describing the powers of the president, the court said the president was entitled to former president would be entitled to some immunity, qualified or absolute, for any official acts. And absolute immunity would kick in for a certain category of official acts that the court called conclusive and exclusive, mm-hmm. or preclusive. Mm-hmm. So among those powers, and these are powers that, according to the court, Congress can't regulate, courts can't police, are the powers of supervision with regard to everybody working on the president's behalf throughout the executive branch. This is a very scary picture. Mm-hmm. And I like to say the only three things that bother me about it: it ignores the constitutional text, it ignores constitutional history, and it's completely oblivious to the danger of authoritarianism that just is present when you say this one person has the power to fire at will anybody doing any policy relevant work throughout the executive branch, which is close to where we are.
Here's how you put it in your Atlantic article that we're talking about. This is you. I'm quoting you to you. It's always good. It's hard to overstate how much is wrong in Roberts' narrative of the presidency. It muddles constitutional text. It flouts constitutional history. It is willfully ignorant of the risks of authoritarianism in a polarized populist age. Its very premise that the Constitution creates a one-person branch of government is provably untrue by just reading the Constitution, which again refers to executive departments. The president's constitutional role does not require at-will removal power, except in the case of those few officials who directly assist the president in fulfilling specific Article 2 roles. I mean, yes. You couldn't put it any better than I couldn't put it any better than that.
I still find it persuasive. I will say that again, this was not anticipated. This was not unanticipated by people thinking about executive power in the past. So in the 1830s, Joseph Story, who is, of course, one of the first great justices of the Supreme Court, in those days, you could apparently have enough time, even if you were a Supreme Court justice, to also be on the Harvard Law faculty. And while he was doing that, he was able to write a treatise, which was really the kind of preeminent treatise about the Constitution before the Civil War. And Congress decided early on that whatever Article 2 meant, the president was not required to get the Senate's approval to fire somebody. That was actually an early fight. Could the president do this by himself, or did he need the Senate? And Story said, Alexander Hamilton, when he wrote The Federalist, said the Senate would be involved. I think he was right, but practices evolve differently. But he said it's very important that this idea not be extended to the thought that the president can fire anybody at will, because in the hands of a person of, I'm going to mess up his exact.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
A base person of high ambition and base principles. This will turn, every government official into a mere creature of the president. Just concerned about basically fulfilling the president's wishes rather than taking care of faithfully executing the law. I mean, he saw this in 1833.
Yeah. He saw the coming of Donald Trump, the possibility that a populist would ride in, and then emboldened by an immunity decision, that's where the monster got loose, right? On his return.
Well, it is. I suppose that is true, and it is where it is the opinion, I think, that best captures what has become the psychology of the Trump administration. Donald Trump being Donald Trump, you could argue he didn't really need a legal theory to think that he was, the be all and end all, that he would be the chief executive, not just of the executive branch, but of the Kennedy Center, Harvard University, CBS, every institution that has the capacity for independent thought in the country. He might have had that aspiration anyway, but it is being able to point to these lines in Supreme Court opinions, most often written by Roberts, that say he's the one-man branch of government. He has this power beyond regulation to control how people working on his behalf exercise their discretionary judgment. That really is what's shaping his psychology.
Yeah. And Roberts is taking an opportunist with this president breaking this many eggs to make his omelet, has decided to use this guy to create a body of law and precedent that will live beyond him to memorialize the unitary president model, right? Enshrine it once and for all in Supreme Court precedent. And the sad part of this discussion is that if a normal, not base person, as Story anticipated, had been elected president, we wouldn't be talking about some of these we would, some of them have already happened, but we wouldn't be talking about the immunity decision. We wouldn't be talking about the firing of Gwen Wilcox and the others and Kathy Harris and the body of law that has accumulated under, as a law professor, there's going to be entire treatises, hornbooks that are just devoted to Trump law, just law with his name in it. Precedent with his name in it. And it's all because we have this guy and Roberts as an opportunist wanting to take advantage of it to put in the books for a long period of time as precedent, this doctrine.
Well, one of the things, so first of all, let me just elicit a little sympathy here. I co-author a case book, I would say, I like to say the case book on separation of powers law. Mm-hmm. I am now working on its new edition. And
right.
This is not easy because, every week there's a new issue that sort of has to be thought about.
How do you teach law today? I mean, like when you and I were in law school, I graduated from Duke in 91 and you graduated from Yale. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some other
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Some other time. But when we were there, everything was static enough that whatever body of law you were taught in con law or other classes for the 3 years you were there, sure, things may have changed after you got one or two cases might have got overturned, but you sort of had a full. How do you teach law today in real time about issues that are being reshaped, as you said, restructured, recalibrated by this United States Supreme Court? I feel sorry for law professors. I feel sorry for law students.
I will say so. I have, I was teaching full time at Ohio State for a long time, and then moved to New York, and NYU was nice enough to give me this residency. And I told them I'm good for teaching one course a year. That's about as much grading as I still have in me. And they've been kind enough to ask me to teach constitutional law a few times. I'm doing the legislation and administrative law course this coming year. But whenever I teach constitutional law, and this goes back a ways, there's a point in the semester when an agitated student will say, sometimes politely, sometimes with a certain degree of upset affect, how could this be law? Why are we treating this as law? Are the judges just making this up? You saw this when Dobbs was overturned. When Dobbs overturned Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
And now, with what's going on with regard to the presidency. And what you say about the stability of the law, yeah, you're right. I mean, things did change, incrementally. There were some big cases, to be sure. But the case that, again, let's just talk about Humphrey's Executor. Humphrey's Executor was decided in 1935. This was the one that upheld the constitutionality of the FTC. A unanimous opinion. It is a unanimous opinion by a court that is as ideologically diverse as any imaginable. I mean, you have, the so-called four horsemen of the apocalypse, the most anti-New Deal, pro laissez-faire justices. You have, the beginnings of the most, pro-New Deal folks. You have the early 20th century liberals, Cardozo and Brandeis. And so this is, a diverse coalition. And I want to say a very smart people. Cardozo's in the room, Brandeis is in the room. Justice Stone, I think, is the one who wrote the opinion. I'm sorry, Justice Sutherland wrote the opinion. I think he was, and he had been a law professor at Columbia. I mean, this
it's like the powerhouse of
powerhouse
this is dream team, Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, I sometimes joke that not too diverse unless you count. Some have beards and some don't. That's
different shades of white.
Right, exactly. And their hair is, like ours, different shades. But having said that, now the court is contemplating whether to overturn that opinion. And for sure, the vote will not, if they do so, they won't have more than a 6-3 vote. They might have only a 5-4. But it flies in the face of the usual principle that, we heard about in law school. This is as far as my Latin goes, but stare decisis, let the decision stand.
Right.
Where the court is supposed to pay respect.
Super precedent, 100 years old,
Yeah. And with regard to this particular decision, Congress has relied on this decision in designing, dozens of agencies.
Yeah.
Now, what we saw, you mentioned the firing of Gwen Wilcox from the NLRB and Kathy Harris from the Merit Systems Protection Board. And the Supreme Court, and we don't have to get into all the procedural details, but basically rendered a decision that said, these people ought to stay fired while their case is making its way back up to the Supreme Court. And they did something weird. I mean, judicially weird. They said it's been argued to us that if their dismissals are upheld, this will threaten the independence of
the Federal Reserve Chair.
Right. And they said that doesn't follow at all, because the Fed is a unique institution that harkens back to a tradition beginning with the first and second national banks of the United States. A few things to notice about that.
completely gratuitous protection for Jay Powell.
That's right. It's like, yeah. And what's your recipe for lasagna? This is not, this is not part of the case right now. Second, this idea that there's a resemblance between the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve in 2025
the first bank,
and the first and second banks of the United States, that's just nonsense.
Right.
It's just
the Treasury may be a comparator.
Well, but some kind of bank.
A bank. Yeah, that's true.
Up there is the word bank.
Right.
Not bank regulator.
Right.
This is completely different. So this assurance and as it happens, about a week or two before this decision was rendered, I had an opportunity to talk with a friend of mine who is takes a more unitary executive view of the Constitution. And, I think he's wrong, but we have a nice relationship. And I said, well, what do you think about the Fed? And he said, if Humphrey's executor is not overruled, it'll be because of the Fed, because for the court to be taken seriously as an originalist court, a court that looks back at the way the Constitution was written, for them to just invent a carve out for the Fed would be a really bad look. And
he said that before the decision?
Before the decision. And, I didn't call him up afterwards and say,
I would
have. Say, how's it looking now? But the idea that they're even thinking about that just shows how far they've come from anything like an honest use of history.
Yeah, this is just this is just engineering, judicial activism. They wanted to put a ring fence around the Fed and Jay Powell during this presidency, and they did, which is great because it's the thing we kept talking about when every time Donald Trump said, I'm going to fire Jay Powell, we said here on Legal AF, that's never happening. The Wall Street knows it. You know it. The Supreme Court knows it. You're not firing him. And then you saw after his walkabout with his hard hat at where he tried to embarrass Jay Powell and got embarrassed in turn, he said, "Yeah, I'm going to keep him." He says, "They don't May 2026. That's okay. We'll keep him until then." The rates are going to get voted on Wednesday, and he's going to lose. They're not going to cut the rates, and he's not going to fire Jay Powell, and everybody's going to sleep better at night.
Well, I think that is probably true. I also think, again, the court in this unsigned opinion, spreads these tea leaves that kind of indicate whatever we do about, Gwynne Wilcox and Kathy Harris, we're probably not going to go along with firing the Fed chair at will. Yeah. So what happens? You start having, right-wing media, and amplified by J.D. Vance, starting saying, maybe there was fraud committed in the rehabbing of the bill. They start laying out
the cause
what they think is plausible for cause grounds to dismiss Powell. So, the administration has said to the Supreme Court, "We're not going to defy you, but what we are going to do is going to read you as narrowly as humanly possible."
Oh,
and then
1,000%. My favorite moment, we'll close on this. My favorite moment is when, because he has I don't believe all of this stuff in the internet about Donald Trump being illiterate and not being able to read, but he certainly had trouble with his gotcha moment where he pulled out to end his tour. He said, well, it's really $3.1 billion. It's really, and Jay Powell's like, I've never heard that number before for the remodeling. He goes, well, here, it's right here. And then, it's right here. I don't know who writes this for the Fed. And Jay Powell puts on his glasses with his hard hat still on. And he goes, yeah, this is the building. You added an entire building from 5 years ago in your administration. That's an entire building. Well, it's part of the renovation. No, it's a completed building from 5 years ago. When you he didn't say the rest, which was when you appointed me to, which he forgot, to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Remember?
Yeah. Right. Sorry, who was president when Epstein died?
All of it. I mean, you just saw Trump say, I don't know why Biden appointed Jay Powell to be the Fed Reserve chair. Like, hello, who is that guy? Look just like you, appointed Jay Powell. Welcome back. We do all sorts of fun things here on Legal AF. Some of it's just hot take commentary by people like me, Michael Popok, co-founder of Legal AF. I do about 4 videos a day right here. Then I'm joined by another dozen contributors who run the entire gamut of point of view. You know, we've got I always call them our Gen Z, but we've got 2 people in Rachel Cohen and Tiara Mack on Pragmatic Optimist, all the way up to Cindy Blumenthal and Sean Wallens on Court of History, Court Accountability Action, Lisa Graves and Alex Aronson, Dina Dahl, me, Michael Popok, the Civil Action guys, Shant and Brian. We've got It's Complicated, the podcast with Asha and Renato. And sometimes we bring on the newsmakers. We've had senators and congresspeople just in the last month, former federal judges that matter. We've got reporters who were the newsmakers who broke the story about Epstein, like Michael Wolff and Julie K. Brown, all here together under one roof of Legal AF. Take a moment, hit the free subscribe button, come over to Legal AF Substack, do the exact same thing. If you just did that, we could stop asking for subscribers. So take a moment and hit the button. That's the way to support what we're doing here. We don't have outside investors. We're not owned by a corporate parent. We don't have a paywall. Hit the button. Till my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.